Hi, everyone, and welcome to Behind the Numbers. My name is Dave Bookbinder, and we dig deeper here to understand what really matters most in business. And if you've listened to this show, you understand that oftentimes what really matters most in business focuses on leadership. And today we're going to be having a conversation about leadership with Doug Thorpe, who is a business advisor, executive coach, and also a host of a show called Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hey, Doug, welcome to Behind the Numbers.
Hey, thanks, Dave. Pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you, and I love the idea of having a show called Leadership Powered by Common Sense because oftentimes, as you probably know, that's a missing component. But before we get into this fun stuff, tell the audience a little bit about who you are and who you serve.
Yeah, Dave, thanks. Real quick flyover. I've had the good fortune to live my professional life in many different sectors. In the early chapter, I was a military officer. I was a captain in the Army. Before I got out, I went into banking, dealt with large corporate environments there. Ultimately, my bank became part of the Chase organization. Went through all of those mergers and acquisitions, but then upon taking an early retirement, leaving banking after 20 years, I went into consulting, where I worked with a full spectrum of businesses, all sizes, all shapes, all forms of many different industries. And in 2008, I turned my attention to coaching and helping leaders become better bosses, better influencers for their organization. Been doing that ever since.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Jumping right in, Doug, when we talk about leadership on this program, a recurring theme seems to be mindset, right? It's an inner game and it starts inside your head to begin with. So talk a little bit about what it means to develop your own identity as a leader.
That's a great question, Dave, and it is something I fully support and believe in. I have all of my clients begin our work together with framing up, setting up the notion of the leader they think they want to be. And on occasion, when I pose that proposition to them, it's actually a stunner. It's like, well, I've never really thought about that. I don't know. So we start with a simple methodology of listing out some attributes that resonate with you and things that you relate to in terms of your own values and beliefs. Maybe your experience and upbringing dictates that you operate a certain way. But if you've never specifically framed that up and said, that's what I want to do, that's what I want to be, it's the classic, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So we start with that end in mind to shape up that definition, and then we do all of our coaching work around those principles and attributes.
And when we think about leadership, a lot of folks who are currently in leadership roles, they've worked their way up through the ranks, they've earned the title for whatever reason, whether it's tenure or execution, competence, et cetera. They are where they are. But I want to ask you to focus your attention just for a moment here, Doug, on the next generation leaders, those up and coming in organizations, and what can they be doing to work on their mindset as they begin their leadership journey?
Well, that too is a great idea, and the newer generation that's coming into business is still being faced with the long-standing legacy of the way we pick managers and leaders in our organizations. I see it still to this day, and that is that someone joins a company as an individual contributor. They're hired to be a salesperson or an accountant or an engineer or whatever, and they go to work, they do good work, and they're recognized as the best in their class, or they're the best in their group. So the company says, well, we need a supervisor, team leader here, you're the best, so let's make you be that guy. And thus begins the journey. So what has traditionally happened, the poor soul that gets tapped that way goes through a process. Some companies are better than others for providing manager training, but more often than not, it's sort of training by osmosis, and that doesn't always work. So the message to the younger person, be proactive, be your own champion, saying, when they come tap you on the shoulder and say, we want you to be the team leader, ask for some training, some programs and it might have to be outside the company, but maybe have them hire you a coach to come in and help you begin the journey to be an effective leader, not just a manager.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mentioned this stat in my first book in talking about that gap that you alluded to with regard to training. And it goes something like this. You get promoted, and 10 years later, you get your first management training. And I've seen it far too often in not only the firms I've been with, but client companies I've served over the years, where folks are promoted into leadership roles because, like you mentioned, they're good with numbers or they're good with a task, and now they're going to be responsible for people, and it doesn't always translate. So when you are this next gen person who has now been tagged as somebody who's an up and comer and targeted for leadership, one of the things that I hear a lot from those individuals is, I'm scared, I'm not ready. It's kind of the imposter syndrome vibe, Doug. Talk about that.
Well, what I've discovered when that topic presents itself, when someone says, truth be told, I do feel like I'm an imposter. If anybody knew what I didn't know about what I'm doing, I would be found out. And the first word I share with folks when that comes up is, you're not alone. I would argue that close to 100% of anybody that has moved into a new role in some form or fashion will experience that fear. And some of the best guidance that I can think of is you really need to, in some way, embrace that. Let that awareness of that possibility be more of a positive in terms of driving, maybe creating a hunger for learning more, doing more. Don't let it cripple you, but acknowledge it and find maybe a mentor in the organization, or again, someone outside that can serve as a coach, guide, or mentor to kind of help you through those moments. But number one, don't believe you're unique in feeling that. You are not alone. Just about everybody that has ever climbed the ladder has experienced that.
Yeah, and thank you. And sometimes even when you're on that top of the ladder, you still feel that way. I hear that from CEOs
Absolutely.
all the time. Doug, tell the audience how they can learn more about you and how they can connect with you.
Yeah, the best way to do that, Dave, is come to my website, which is simply Doug Thorpe, THORPE.com. There, I've got a lot of information there. I've got some downloads, some helpful hints. I've got an archive of about 1,000 articles on leadership and development. And of course, you can always hop over to my podcast, but there's a link on the website there for that as well.
Yeah, tell the audience very quickly about that show.
Yeah, you alluded to it. The title of the show is Leadership Powered by Common Sense. I've gravitated that direction because a long time ago, I too adopted the idea that if I'm going to be the best leader I can be for the organization I'm working for, I have to dumb down things. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but I mean it for the sake of clarity. And truthfully, it kind of came to me from my Army days, where we have the famous saying, keep it simple, stupid, the KISS principle. That too is not meant to be disrespectful. It's that idea of all of your people need clarity. If you can't give them a clear path for what a win is going to look like, or what the right next thing to do may be, you're fundamentally failing as a leader. So I observe in today's world, we get way too complicated. We get way too overblown with technical jargon and complexities. So I like to boil everything down into the common sense elements. If I can show somebody how to move from A to B in a quick, efficient manner, that's what we do. And on the show, I bring guests that we talk about those things and ways to do it in all the various aspects of leadership.
Yep, and you can find that anywhere you get your podcasts. Doug, I want to move to another component of leadership, which is impact, right? So leaders want to make an impact on their people, their organizations, and even the world. But when we talk about the next gen leaders, and even some of the folks who are currently in leadership roles, their thinking is more tactical than strategic, and there needs to be a shift that happens from tactical to strategic. How do we get there? How do they get there?
Yeah, well, again, great question. And I do think that, too, is a common problem that I deal with anyone that's in kind of a middle management role or even upper management role. Because, again, we go back to the path that we talked about earlier. You get picked as the best contributor. You start your journey in management, and there's this weird psychology of, I got picked because I was a producer, so maybe I need to produce more, and that'll be the answer. Well, that works for that first, second, and perhaps even third promotion. But beyond that, there is an expectation that you begin contributing with that wider lens, that higher level strategy, that 10,000 foot view, not the 1,000 foot view. And again, some organizations are better than others in grooming their managers to lean into that and experience what that might be. But the problem is the individual in that role feels like they're abandoning the thing that got them their success, because they feel the ask to be doing less and thinking more, and that doesn't feel right. So again, part of the way to overcome it is to acknowledge that, and again, be proactive in asking up the chain. Talk to me about strategy. How did you learn to be a strategist? How did you learn to think with a bigger lens, and get that kind of guidance and support?
Yeah, would you say thinking more and doing less is counterintuitive? That's an interesting one. That's a tweetable moment right there. Doug, in moving from impact to influence, right? You think about leadership roles and creating influence for the folks below you on the org chart, perhaps. But you've also got to be able to create influence the other direction, up the org chart. Can you speak to that, creating influence in both directions?
Yeah, I'm really thankful you phrased it that way. This too is a topic. You've kind of hit all my top 3 to 5 topics that I deal with most of my clients about. Often people come to me and say, my biggest challenge is managing my boss. And I say, let's stop right there. Let's just set the table. You're not ever going to manage your boss. That's, as the old saying goes, that's stinking thinking. You're set up to fail if that's what you think you're trying to achieve. Now, you can influence your boss. You can do things to try to contribute to other ways of thinking. But the key to getting that started is really trying to have some honest discussions with your boss about how they operate, how they look at the world, so that you can find those openings where you can insert some ideas, insert some recommendations without burning all your own personal capital to get there.
Yeah, Doug, we're getting down to the short strokes here. I know you've got a hard stop, and I'm trying to squeeze in as much as I can, so there's only about 4 minutes or so to go here. But I want to ask you the difference between leadership and management. We see memes on the internet all the time, and one with regard to management, it's something to the effect of, you see a team of people pulling a big rock, the manager's at the back cracking the whip, but conversely, the leader is the one who's in front helping to pull. Talk a little bit about the difference between management and leadership.
Yeah, one of the best phrases I learned a long time ago, a dear friend of mine gave it to me. His name's Dave Guerra. He's done a study with the top 30 highest performing CEOs he could get audience with. And the bottom line is, his definition of that difference is that management is about process, but leadership is about people. And I think if you start with that sort of spectrum in mind, you realize managers can punch the buttons, crack the whips, as you say, and get things done. And some people make entire careers out of it. But leaders learn who and what their people are about. They find opportunities for helping the people that work for them be their best selves when they show up for work. And they work hard to make the people thrive, not just use them as assets. You know, I hate the phrase, my most valuable asset is my people. I hate that phrase. I think it frames up, and that's probably another whole episode we can get into.
It is, because I in my books and in my speaking, I talk about people are your most valuable asset, but I'm doing it from the lens of the fact that people really are considered an intangible asset in the valuation and the accounting world. It gets into a whole different rabbit hole about how we in my profession value people, but assets are things that you invest in, and expenses are things that you try to reduce. So that's why I like to say that people are assets, and your most valuable assets. But maybe we can have that debate another time. I know you have to bounce, but I really want to thank you for joining us today here on Behind the Numbers, Doug.
I really appreciate it, Dave. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. We've been talking with Doug Thorpe, who is a business advisor, executive coach, and as we talked about, he is also the host of a podcast called Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Check that out wherever you stream. My name is Dave Bookbinder, and I'm the one that my clients turn to when they want to know what their most important assets are worth. So if you're a business owner and you don't know what the value of your business is, we should probably have a conversation, and you can find me on LinkedIn. Thanks to Emma back there in the darkness producing the show today. Great job as always, Emma. And big thanks to you out there for watching and listening. Can't do the program without you, and we really do appreciate your support. That's it for today, gang. We will see you next time on Behind the Numbers. Take care, everybody.